Why was Moses' body never found? The Exodus was the defining moment of Moses' life, a time of incredible escape. Over 2 million enslaved people fled from one of the world's most secure nations. This miraculous story, filled with divine intervention, features some of the most famous events in the Bible. At the heart of this was Moses, who witnessed more miracles than Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob combined. Miracle after miracle unfolded as God acted on behalf of his people. Some of these signs might appear magical, like when Moses' staff turned into a snake, but most were clear displays of God's power over nature, showing his control over creation to protect his people. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share this video. Let's go. Moses' life itself was marked by divine intervention. As a baby, he was saved from a decree that all Hebrew male infants should be thrown into the Nile River, where they would likely be eaten by crocodiles. Most people are familiar with the story, yet Moses survived and was raised in the Egyptian court, receiving the highest education, all under God's guidance. Moses is often seen as the second most important figure in the Old Testament, after Abraham. However, his privileged life as a prince ended when he killed an Egyptian who was mistreating a Hebrew slave, forcing Moses to flee Egypt. His life story is remarkable. Moses spent 40 years in exile as a shepherd before returning to lead his people for another 40 years. It's clear that God's hand was at work throughout his life. One of the most significant moments was when Moses encountered God through the burning bush, an extraordinary event in itself. But perhaps even more striking were the excuses Moses made to avoid leading the Israelites out of Egypt. He first claimed he was unworthy, then said he was unknowledgeable and had nothing to say. He doubted anyone would believe him, but God reassured him, promising miracles when Moses said he wasn't a good speaker because of his stammer. God provided his brother Aaron to speak on his behalf. When it comes to Moses' death, the Bible leaves us with a sense of mystery. We are told little about how he died, but 3 specific passages mention his passing and burial. It is known that Moses was 120 years old when he died, yet the Bible states that his eyesight was still sharp and his physical strength had not faded. Even in old age, Moses was still in his prime when God called him home. He died alone on Mount Nebo, gazing across the Jordan River at the Promised Land, a place he would never enter due to his earlier disobedience at Meribah. God had forbidden Moses from entering the Promised Land because he failed to honor him at the waters of Meribah Kadesh. Despite this, Moses led the Israelites right to the border of Canaan and was allowed to see the land he had fought so long to reach. At the end of his life, God showed him the land from the top of Mount Nebo. In Numbers 27:12-13, God tells Moses to ascend the mountain and view the land he had given to the Israelites, but then reminds him that he will be gathered to his people, as his brother Aaron was, explaining that Moses' disobedience was the reason for his exclusion. In Deuteronomy 32:51-52, God states, "This is because you broke faith with me at the waters of Meribah Kadesh, in the desert of Zin, and because you did not uphold my holiness among the Israelites." The incident at Meribah is recorded in Numbers 20, where the Israelites, nearing the end of their 40-year journey, found themselves without water. They turned on Moses and Aaron, blaming them for their suffering. In response, Moses and Aaron prayed to God, who instructed Moses to speak to the rock, and water would come forth. But in frustration, Moses struck the rock twice with his staff instead of simply speaking to it as God had commanded. This act of disobedience was more serious than it might seem at first. Moses not only disobeyed God's direct command, but he also appeared to take credit for the miracle by saying, "Must we bring you water from this rock?" instead of giving the glory to God. Because this happened in front of all the people, God couldn't overlook it. The lesson was about trusting in God and honoring His holiness. Moses had walked closely with God, and his failure to fully trust and obey was a significant lapse. Interestingly, the rock from which the water flowed is seen as a symbol of Christ in 1 Corinthians 10:4, where Paul writes, "They drank from the spiritual rock that accompanied them, and that rock was Christ." The first time Moses struck a rock in Exodus 17, it was meant to symbolize Christ being struck down for our salvation. But when Moses struck the rock again in Numbers 20, it disrupted this symbolism. Christ was sacrificed once for all, as Hebrews 7:27 explains, and striking the rock again broke that imagery. Instead, Moses was meant to speak to the rock, representing prayer and faith in the provision that comes from Christ's sacrifice. By striking the rock twice, Moses disrupted a powerful biblical picture and undermined the message of trust in God. The severity of his punishment was a reflection of the importance of this lesson. God wanted to demonstrate that true faith requires obedience and reverence, and through Moses' actions, he showed the people his holiness. Moses strikes the rock, Exodus 17 and Numbers 20. The incident where Moses struck the rock instead of speaking to it, Numbers 20, is viewed as a misrepresentation of Christ's sacrifice. In Exodus 17, the rock was struck once, symbolizing Christ's single sacrifice for all. By striking it again in Numbers, Moses distorted this image, leading to his punishment, being barred from entering the promised land. This symbolizes that salvation cannot be attained through the works of the law represented by Moses, but only through Jesus, Joshua, whose name means Yeshua, or Jesus. Moses' death and burial, Deuteronomy 34. Despite his disobedience, Moses died in honor and faith. God personally buried him, and his burial site remained unknown to avoid it becoming a shrine, given the Israelites' tendency toward idolatry. Moses was revered as a faithful servant, and the mourning period lasted 30 days, far exceeding the usual 7 days. Satan and the Archangel Michael, Jude 1:9. There's a mysterious reference in Jude where Michael the Archangel contends with Satan over the body of Moses. This event emphasizes the ongoing spiritual warfare and Michael's respect for God's authority, as he refrains from slandering Satan, instead invoking God's rebuke. It contrasts with false teachers who blaspheme without understanding spiritual realities. The narrative serves as a cautionary example about the dangers of arrogance and rebellion against divine authority. Lessons on authority and spiritual warfare. The comparison to Cain, Balaam, and Korah, who rebelled against God's authority, underscores the theme of obedience and humility. These figures, known for their disobedience, greed, and rejection of authority, serve as a warning about the consequences of straying from God's will.